we should be getting ready for our next session. This is Professor John Hellriegel here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Arun, you're there?
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
Can you see me?
Good to see you. Excellent. And
Nice seeing you.
Mike Zinkiewich, are you on the call? I think so.
I am on, John. Nice to talk with you again.
Hey, how are you feeling?
Feeling better now. Thank you.
Good, very good. Excellent, excellent. All right, so just a little bit of the logistics. So we have 5 excellent panelists, right? Two online, 3 in the room. So the biggest challenge that we're going to have is actually to get all of our ideas out in an hour's time, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's fantastic. So what I wanted to do was talk about digital supply chain, what it means to you, examples, success stories, battle scars that you may have as well, and also, where do we see this going for different companies, right? But what I'd like to do first is actually have you all take 2 minutes to introduce yourselves, because this is a tremendously diverse group of people, right? And so just hearing about where you are, what you've done in your careers, and what's going on now would be fantastic. So Arun, would you start us off, please?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I am Arun Kumar Bhaskara-Baba. I am the Chief Digital and Information Officer for Honeywell Aerospace. Just started a month ago here. So really transforming the whole digital business model, as well as the entire supply chain for aerospace industry, which is a totally different dynamic compared to where I spent my past 15 years. I was with Johnson & Johnson, had different roles in Johnson & Johnson. I was the CIO for pharma supply chain. And I was leading the whole digital supply chain transformation for pharma. And then I was the chief information officer for all of the manufacturing operations. Johnson & Johnson, we had 100+ manufacturing sites across different types of manufacturing, whether you call it discrete manufacturing, process manufacturing, biologics manufacturing, fill finish operations. So really transforming the manufacturing operations with Industry 4.0, and actually 6 of our sites were recognized as lighthouse sites by World Economic Forum. And before that, I worked at Dell and Ford Motor Company across different areas with product development, engineering, shared services, all across IT. But really, how do we transform the operations using technology and digital capabilities so that you can actually accelerate the business value realization? That's kind of like has been my area of focus as I stitch my career together. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And by the way, I'm sure you're going to bring that to Honeywell. I worked there for a decade, and I love the company as well. Mike Zinkiewich, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Mike Zinkiewich here. I work for Beam Suntory. I am leading North America S&OP. This is my 4th CPG S&OP IBP implementation. So built a career around really driving S&OP and simplifying business processes through proper planning. Analytics and data science has always been the foundation and the starting point. The data analytics team is reporting into me, and as we start on our journey, I've been at Beam for a year now, and then prior to that, various big CPGs, so leading S&OP at Kellogg's, Kraft, and Cadbury. So started my career in finance. I'm a CPA, and worked my way into understanding really different facets of the business, but all roads leading to business process and development, which we like to bundle under S&OP. So that's a little bit about my background.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Kashif?
Well, thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kashif Zafar. I am heading the commercial data team at the business side, the GSK GlaxoSmithKline currently. Over the last 24 years, I mostly focused on the life sciences with large pharmaceutical companies with a global focus. Spent major portion of my career on playing various roles on the technology side. As a training, I have 2 engineering degrees, so I was trained as an engineer, and then I attended Rutgers Executive MBA program. Harvu, if you're watching somewhere recorded,
Someone was watching you.
go Emba. So I finished that program in 2002. It was a wonderful time. So it's always great to be back at the alma mater. Pretty much then I played various global leadership roles. 16 years at Pfizer, where my team also supported 65 global manufacturing sites. And I was also part of the global innovation team, understanding the disruptive trends across industry as well as Pfizer. Have always been a major data transformation person in my career. Data is fueling the innovation, it's fueling the transformation, it's fueling the digital aspect of it. So have seen some of these things up close and personal, and currently at the largest data transformation initiative that these for commercial.
Welcome. Mahesh, please.
Very good. Good morning, folks. Mahesh Harvu, Enterprise Transformation Advisor at Microsoft, a fabulous company. I was a practitioner for a long time, 30 plus years actually, and then decided to make a switch and focus exclusively on transformation with some of our biggest customers at Microsoft. And I say big, it's not necessarily in terms of revenue and size, even though that's a factor, but it's actually with companies that are vested and they would like to transform. Sometimes that could be $1 billion company as well, or it could be $100 billion company, but it's more of the intent and the objective to transform. And that is very rewarding and satisfying because we are at the front now driving 4.0, whether it is supply chain 4.0, industry 4.0 as part of it. And to me, at the end of the day, what boils down is what defines 4.0. And as Kashif was saying, it's all around data. And that is where we are focusing quite a bit with the capabilities and the expertise we bring. Really, it's just fascinating when I work through customers and see what the opportunities are and where we can drive this. Prior to that, worked with companies like Philips Signify, Altria and Philip Morris, but have been in this CPG manufacturing space my entire career. I say I'm a manufacturing CPG lifer. And I'm glad to continue that now.
Very good. Excellent. Welcome. And Glenn, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Glenn Pasquale. I'm sort of the black sheep of my family. The rest of my family is in politics and government, and I went the route of corporate world. I graduated from graduate school at Fordham in economics and had no idea what I wanted to do. And a company by the name of Warner Lambert decided that I convinced them to hire me as a forecast analyst. During the interview, they asked me about game theory. I told them about game theory. I got it all wrong, but they hired me anyway. And that started my journey. That was probably 1997. And I was there a short time and moved into a big apparel company, BF Corp, which I loved. They had many different divisions and really forecasting for them, and worked my way up in that company, and then eventually moved on. I've been at Citizen Watch Group, which is Citizen brand, Bulova brands, and we have a luxury division now out of Geneva for North America for about 15 years now. And we're on our digital transformation journey is really just started in earnest last year with our CPG. We hired a data scientist who's reporting to our chief marketing officer. So that should tell you something very interesting. The role of information in our world is nothing short of amazing. And I think finally, through Gartner and other, industry people, we're really getting the exposure, I think, because we're finally seeing the tools and what they can do to transform business. So I'm very pleased to be here and thank you for the invitation.
Excellent, excellent. Like I said, very diverse group of folks, lots of knowledge and perspective here. So let's talk about digital supply chains, right? So, I have to say, right? So I'm a very practical person. I read all the literature, supply chain 4.0, all of these things, right? And we're inundated by ideas, right? On what the digital supply chain is or could be, right? So I'll ask a question which is a little open-ended for you, right? So when you think about the digital supply chain, what are the key elements for you, right? What are the things that sort of the framework or the important areas for a digital supply chain? And so I'll probably just for consistency, I'm going to keep the same order of panelists. So Arun, would you like to say a few words on that?
Yeah, for me, digital supply chain is a means to an end, right? For me, digital supply chain starts with the customer and ends with the customer. So you put the customer at the center of it, and then how the entire value chain supports that customer and adding value using digital and data together to deliver that value for the customer. So for me, it's digital supply chain is not the end, right? That's a means to an end on how do you actually deliver the products and services to the customer in the most efficient, effective way using these advanced technologies and transforming the business. That's how I frame it.
Excellent. Excellent. Mike?
Yeah, Arun, that was really good. So I'll build on a little bit where you went. But for me, it's that, but it's making data accessible and really making sure that we're driving to decisions. So it's that end-to-end data, but it's in a transparent way and an accessible way so that you can drive better decision making. And when you take it from your customer and you think of internal, external data, how do you make that accessible to drive business decisions? And really, that's the importance of it. And so.
Excellent. Yeah. You have data, and how do we translate that into action? Kashif, please.
Yeah, no, I agree with the panelists. Like Arun pointed out the customer aspect of it, and so to me, we cannot look at supply chain in isolation only. What happens is that companies struggle when they look at the digital optimization or digital initiatives and in isolation for different groups. And then within that groups, they start dozens and hundreds of digital projects going into various directions. And I think that's where a lot of the digital transformation projects actually feel tremendous, pretty, and face a difficult time in cutting fundings and all that. When we talk to companies and executives, you would hear that there's just a common theme when you talk about digital transformation in general. People feel like, hey, it's either reducing cost or improving productivity, right? I mean, these are the two pretty broad themes: reduce costs and improve productivity. Well, these are great objectives, but guess what? You could be the most cost-effective and productive bank. At the end of the day, you might be taken over by Alipay or Apple Pay. Right? So being cost-effective and being productive is just not enough. So you have to reimagine the entire business model to be able to be relevant and really grow in your industry. So to me, digital transformation around supply chain is really reimagining my own business model for my company and really trying to understand what's driving my customer and my connection to the customer, as Arun pointed out, and then really build everything around that, right? In holistic view, and that transformation then should be aligned with supply chain, with R&D, and with commercial in a cohesive manner. And to me, then how the other panelists slightly pointed out, data would then feed all of that end to end, making it easy, because ultimately business executive will be making decisions based on the data or the information. If the data is not right, the information would not be timely or accurate. So again, to be reimagining the business model itself and really then tying your digital strategy, your business strategy, then perhaps your operational strategy and internal competence would then give you a comprehensive.
Excellent. Excellent. Love it.
Well, as they say, being digital doesn't mean anything to do about digital, but it's at the end of the day, are you creating value out of it? Whether you call it digital supply chain or whatever you call it, right? At the end is that value creation. So in that sense, to me, it's about the agility aspect that makes a difference. Classic example is what we saw in the last 2 years. Supply chain officers used to say, just in time, just in time, just in time inventory. Last 2 years completely thrashed that concept. Supply chain officers were rewarded for safety stock build-up. But 2 years ago, you had to thrash safety stock. You had to be lean on safety stock. And but 2 years, you are rewarded for safety stock. So unless you have a supply chain that's digital and agile, you won't be able to make that switch. I was talking to 2 global supply chain leaders in the last 1 month. And their biggest problem now is they have too much safety stock, and now they're not able to get rid of it now. Because they were lean, then they built up safety stock, and now demand's falling, so they're not able to get it. So unless and until the whole supply chain end-to-end has that agility factored in, you won't be able to calibrate quickly. To me, that's what digital supply chain becomes. And so the value creation aspect goes in there. Otherwise, my fear is supply chain will always be looked at as trucks, ships, pallets, boxes, right? Versus saying, okay, if I'm part of the value creation cycle, then supply chain is not looked at that. It's not looked at, okay, am I doing demand forecasting for my slow moving inventory and all of that, but it's being looked at, what does value mean? What does the customer want? How am I delivering?
Excellent. Excellent. Glenn?
I would also start with the consumer. I mean, we're on a journey here, right? It's, I remember years ago, I was on an interview and I showed the gentleman all the analytical work I could do. And the next question he said to me was, well, sometimes we want to shape what the consumer buys and thinks. You know, I've always been on the demand side. So understanding what drives demand is what brands are about. I've always been on brands, on the apparel, now watches, very similar. That's really critical. I think we forecast time series. We talk about that as being digital forecast accuracy. That's really nothing, right? It's a historical projection at best. Being very agile today is what's really critical, right? Saying and that may mean that I have to work around very static pieces of my supply chain that I cannot change because I work for a company, the parent company is in Japan. So it's a separate profit center with their own, you don't always have the synergistic, interconnected company, which understands the priorities. Working backwards from understanding what drives the consumer, finding the right consumers is what the CDP roadmap has been for us. So we kind of started there a year ago with the data scientists, as I mentioned, through the marketing group, not IT, not anywhere else in the company, not supply chain, to help us build what is the consumer, what's the lifetime, how can we retain the consumer, how do we find the right consumers for our products today? We talk about optimization a lot, I think, in the value chain, but how do I have to first understand what the root causes of my demand are, and that's the consumer that driving that demand. So we're on a transformation ourselves backwards. You start there and then you work on how can I predict more? accurately. One is create a purchase, POS forecast that you can transform into a shipping forecast. It's not just being more accurate in that, in individual references. It's also presenting to the CEO what the size of our business really is, so that when the top-down conversations happen, you have some something to vet that against, to say that's not a realistic, that trade class doesn't have that level of business you think it does. So that's not a very short answer.
No, I think, well, what's amazing is you all actually answered the question in different perspectives, different ways, but a lot of it is the same theme, right? Which is thinking about the business, thinking about the consumer, right? And then not just supporting, but participating in the work that needs to be done to make the business go, right? So it's not the supply chain only as a support function, but as part of the decision-making, as part of the overall value creation. So well said, I love it. All right, so that was I love that top level perspective, but I always want to get into the real stuff that's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to ask you all is to think about one project, one implementation, one piece of work around the area of digital supply chains, and something that you've done in the past, something that's going on currently, something that was fantastic and had a great return on investment, something that maybe didn't, and the learning from some challenges is also interesting. But I want to hear about a specific example of something that you have been part of that's helped to advance this idea of digital supply chains. Well, Arun, I'm gonna start with you, and I'm sure you're gonna reach back from some of your previous roles. If Arun is there. Arun,
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. So if I kind of like reflect back, there are quite a few of them, right? There are a lot of scars in the back, as well as a lot of smiles as well. So one example is really looking at the whole inventory. I think somebody was saying like we were lean, we went fat, and then we are lean and we're fat back again. And one of the challenges in a pharmaceutical supply chain is the whole life cycle of the product, right? It's a very, very long life cycle when you kind of like go from the API all the way to the delivering the product to the patient. It's a very long supply chain, right? And then a lot of that supply chain is also tax optimized as well, right? So if you look at some of the manufacturing processes, we do a portion of the process in one place and then the another portion, and then it kind of like moves around. The product also moves around. So in a more or less, it's a global supply chain. And one of the key aspects from a customer point of view, how do you drive access and affordability for the customer in that supply chain, right? And how do you make those trade-off decisions? And what we've actually, I think like Mike was mentioning this, right? It's really boiled down to three things. One is how do you make sure that there is visibility of that inventory, where it is stock, right? And then the second thing is how do you make sure that people make decisions using that information? And then the third thing is how do you actually learn from it, right? So we implemented end-to-end visibility. We called it connected visibility, so that you can actually start from the supplier and all the way to not to the patient. There were some challenges in terms of really getting to the patient, but at least like to the first endpoints, right? And how do you actually have that end-to-end visibility of where the product is and where the inventory is and how the demand is shaping. So we called it connected visibility, and we actually built a platform that can be actually replicated not only for pharmaceuticals, but also for other products in J&J, right? So the great thing is we actually reduced the inventory by close to $100 million across just a couple of products. So that was the fantastic thing. The other thing is we could actually provide access to those critical products in a much more faster way for our patients, right? So ultimately, yes, we reduced the inventory, but we actually made the customers and patients happy, right? So that was the outcome. So the lessons learned from that is, number one, is this is not just a technical data problem, right? This is a problem about how do you make sure that your management, your operations, your execution, the planners, right, and the supervisors, and then the VPs, they're all sitting, all of them should be using the information to make the decision, right? So how do you drive that change is a big thing, right? So I used to sit in a board meeting, and then we had like a real-time visibility that we said, oh yeah, we launched real-time visibility. We sit in the boardroom, and then the supply chain officer says, oh, I need you to come back with a presentation on what will happen if the demand changes like this, right? Or if the competition comes in. My point is, why did we actually put the real-time visibility? If the board cannot start using data real time to make decisions, then how can you expect everybody else to do that, right? So the biggest challenge was that change of mindset, that data can be used in real time to make decisions. So that's kind of like number one. The second thing is the importance of data quality, right? These systems are so complex, so many things that are going around, right? And we can go on and on about all the issues with data, right? If you don't pay attention to the data quality, then you will not be able to actually deliver any value, right? Because you spend first 6 months arguing about data, not about insights and actions. And the third one is, the most important one as well, is value realization. Are you really getting value out of it? And how do you actually monitor it, right? Because suddenly you can say, hey, I reduced inventory by 100 million, and it might be just a luck, right? Like suddenly your demand spiked, and then you used all of your safety stock and say, hey, I reduced my inventory. So how do you make sure that really having these capabilities is giving attribution of value realization is a key lesson learned. So those are the 3 key lessons learned, is driving the change in the leadership, in the operations to use data, ensuring that there is proper data quality, so that like people don't spend a lot of time fighting the data, but actually use the data to drive the insights and actions, and then ensuring that the value is being realized. If not, how do you tweak it? And I can go into technical side of it, but from a more business side, these are the key aspects of it.
No, fantastic. And so many companies are thinking about how do you get that visibility, get that kind of project up off the ground. So that's fantastic. We could probably spend a day on that as well. Mike, please give us an example.
Yeah, sure. I think for me, the example I'll go back to, it starts with a business problem. What are we trying to solve? And in Kellogg's, it was aging inventory. And I think, when you boil it down, is we had access to lots of data, okay, but was it accessible to everyone? So our goal was to reduce aging inventory, and we did that by creating an end-to-end platform. So we could look at product on shelf all the way down to the production facility, and that's a lot of data. But what it's going to do is we broke down functional silos by creating an end-to-end system to drive decision-making. So for me, making it accessible is about being roughly right, not precisely wrong. And sometimes that happens with data because you get so finite because you have access to it. And, in this end-to-end view, what we were trying to do is bring together the different functions that, vertically deep, they have that expertise, but cut across horizontally to the decision-making, right? And we boiled it down into a 3x3 grid. So took all our SKUs, and and you're linking different metrics, whether it's forecast bias, it's aging inventory, value, where are these? And our initial problem was to solve aging inventory and really understand if we have too much inventory, can we shape demand? Can we drive or put sales promotions to push it through? But on the other end, what we also learned is on the forefront was where we were short. And, our goal was to solve where we had too much, but we also were able to balance lines. And having that end-to-end visibility was what was key. But I think our unlock was making it accessible to understand and really take a really large data set and boil it down into a simple 3x3 grid of here's the biggest value that we can create, high volume, high amount of inventory. What are the actions on these? So, for me, it often comes down to simple segmentations and making that data accessible. And again, for me, my theme and my learning is to drive decisions. And if we're not driving decisions, then, what's the purpose of all these different analytics and reports? They're all pretty charts, but if we're not really using them, it's not helping drive the business forward. So that would be my example, John.
Excellent. And by the way, you all are both alluding to themes of sort of complexity of supply chain, department and functional specialization, which leads to isolation, right? So I think that's fantastic. Kashif.
Yeah, no, thanks. A great answer, by the way, my friend. I'll just share my perspective on my recent end-to-end data transformation project, because when we look at the data for a large scale or a global pharmaceutical company, it's pretty exciting stuff, right? The challenge is that usually data projects are sort of initiated again in silo, in isolation. Somebody has a brilliant idea, that person will just bring something, and then it's done, completely not integrated with other systems. Big problem that we have, and Arun will resonate with me on, because I spend most of my career in pharmaceutical life sciences. I can drive examples from that. It is the integration of the data, right? Interoperability of the systems and quality of the data. Some of these challenges impact our day-to-day workings across the entire value chain, not just the supply chain, entire value chain from R&D to commercial to manufacturing aspect of it. So when I look at the data transformation as the head of the data transformation, my challenge was, what do I do on the foundational aspect of the data so that we can leverage the scalability and power and the computing of the modern infrastructure and platforms such as cloud, and Microsoft Azure was a way to go for us, right? How do I really build the right foundation so that every time we need to do, we should not be constrained by, okay, my computer is limited, or my server is limited, or I cannot process it, or it will take, 8 months to just, provision the hardware and software. Cloud gave us a huge opportunity to really cut through all of that and really spin off things from a technical perspective to really not be sort of bogged down by those kind of challenges. So picking up the right platform, picking up the right infrastructure and the right tool was one foundational aspect of it. Then you build the capability aspect of it, and there are multiple capabilities holistically for the end-to-end data transformation that I looked at it, but I just want to pick one capability which will resonate with most of you, and I will call it master data management. Every company struggles with having a single source of truth for product or customer. When you sit down with warehousing people or customer services people or operational management people or R&D and product master people, they will tell you that they have problems in not having a single source of truth about their own customer. They don't know if this customer that they're maintaining in their system is the right information about that customer. So if a shipping address was changed and was not rightly updated, it will be shipped to a whole different location, right? And you will lose a lot of potential revenues along that side. So when you look at, for example, just the product itself and how many groups within pharmaceutical industry or a company really touch that product, we will be amazed. At least good 10 to 12 functional groups actually core touch that product. From medical affairs to scientific affairs to R&D to commercial to sales to supply chain to manufacturing plant, all these people are touching that product. If you don't have the right product master established, right hierarchies established, then people will actually make copies, have those copies. Sometimes you are going to face huge compliance challenges. Otherwise, you would face some major auditing challenges, and we will then be bogged down by those administrative and data quality hassle along the way. So we tackle that master data issue, and I'm just using one example because in the end-to-end data transformation, you have so many other streams that we were working on, And then if we can just make sure that we're not only creating a single source of truth, but also optimizing the data quality aspect of it. So the entire data quality framework plays a role. How do I make sure that the data that I was a young kid, some 20 plus years ago, I was sitting in a meeting, and here's an interesting story. It was senior executive was sitting. It was a big meeting, urgent meeting by the head of the tax person for the global, challenge. And we were talking about one report, and the whole conversation was back and forth. I was sitting at the back of the room. So I raised my hand and I asked a simple question. I'm like, how accurate is that report? And there was a pin drop silence in the room. I'm like, how accurate is that report? And the head of the global tax asked his management team, like, can somebody answer this young man, how accurate is the report? So even though it's a simple, use case, but we as a business leaders face that kind of problem about data accuracy every single day. You can find holes in the data every day in, day out, and it impacts on the timing of the right decision making. It impacts on the timing, Arun rightly said, the board meeting, if they cannot have the real-time data. If I cannot create, COVID, for example, Pfizer was creating this vaccine. Imagine we had only, limited window. So imagine conducting over 46,000 patients for the clinical trials, 150 sites, 5 different countries, somehow real-time basis, right? It's just talking about, extensive amount of data and processing and knowledge and coordination and collaboration across the entire organization, including supply chain. So that's how I say it.
I think that's fantastic because people assume that that foundation of data accuracy, data structures is all set, right? And there's a lot of work to go on in there as well.
Just to give you, just one thing. We, according to McKinsey, over 100,000 people die every year just because of medical errors.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine that we're talking about some serious stuff. 50% of the healthcare cost actually during surgery is consumed by 3% of the errors during surgery. So if we can cut those errors by just to 1%, we can save significant costs from the healthcare system. So holistically, data plays a huge role. Data quality plays a huge role. I cannot emphasize enough, around it.
Yeah, great. Mahesh, please.
Let me take a bit of a different slant on this, if I may.
Sure.
In terms of what can we glean from these problems and challenges, right? It's first of all, Mike said it right, which is it starts with a business problem, and sometimes it's if we don't frame that properly, you can be boiling the ocean. It's great to say we want to be an agile, efficient supply chain company, or we want to satisfy our customers, right? But can you frame and scope that problem in a much more specific way? That is where I've seen success happen. The second aspect is people. Folks have day jobs, but now we are having them transform. Yesterday, over the break, I was sharing this with you. Yesterday, I was in a day-long meeting with a customer, and we are talking about a massive transformation. And he tells me, the problem is, it's not like I don't have skilled people. I do have skilled people, but they're just not skilled in the new ways of working. So it's not like they don't know the core of the processes. They do know it really well. But for you to be working in a cloud-based environment where you are transforming data, as an example, you're looking at lineage, you're looking at taxonomy differently, you're looking at cataloging of data, and all of those things, which are not something that we paid attention to in the past, and now you have to, that is where the gap lies. And so that's one specific there. The second aspect of that is it's technology integration. I am I come from the business world. I was in IT as well, but I say this very bullish in saying, if you are not investing in technology and if technology is not front and center, then it's failing. It's like what the Fidelity CFO or CEO was saying, right? We happen to be a technology company, but sorry, we are a technology company. We just happen to be in the finance business, right? I think that's what he said.
Yeah.
It's same like what pharmaceutical companies are saying. We are in the technology. We are a technology company. We happen to be in the pharma business, right? So that interoperability of technology, and to me, it's like about, are you driving an intelligent order management, leveraging technology? Are you driving that end-to-end integration? The last aspect, which the third one, which I feel we sometimes tend to ignore, and back to failed examples or successful examples, is interoperability across our suppliers. Particularly because it's an integrated value chain globally, you need that integration with other suppliers and their maturity impacts you. Sustainability, I know Arun is in the Honeywell Aerospace, right? As an example, sustainability plays a big role in some of these industries. How do you measure scope 1, 2, 3 emissions coming from your downstream suppliers, from your utility companies and all of that? So again, focusing on that interoperability of our supplier base is the third one.
Gotcha. And Glenn, we're talking about examples, so you're working on some stuff right now, but maybe you want to talk current or past?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something Mahesh said, which I think is very important, a quote from the Fidelity. I went to our SNOP, Gartner's SNOP conference a couple years back. We were off for a couple of years. I went into a Starbucks presentation and I walked out thinking, this is a technology company disguised as a coffee company. And because they have the greatest problem they had was figuring out every single morning, what do I send to every store? And how do I get it there, right? I mean, we just take it for granted. We walk in. And, but so I'll explain a little bit about my own journey. We're talking end to end here. My company it will never have an end-to-end view. I won't say never, but it'll be a long journey for us. My goal is to take the piece that I have. So I can't really impact our suppliers. We have many in the Far East. We produce all of our own movements. Many of them are eco-drive, proprietary. We produce movements for other watch companies, but I have a black box. I send the purchase order, they send the confirmation, I get it 5 months later if I'm lucky. You know, I think what we haven't discussed today is that there's realities of the supply chain that are going to take much longer to transform. I want to know when the baton is handed to me, I have my house in order and I can send back the right information back to them in terms of purchase orders. When we went into COVID period in March of 20, we stopped ordering. We didn't cancel orders with any manufacturers. We kept those relationships, but essentially I was ordered out through August, September. We had to manage that inventory and the cash flow for the better part of, well, over a year until we got back into ordering again. And so it was what was very interesting about the whole experiment was that the planning group had to figure out when are we going to step back in and push management to when are we going to have the confidence to say, and by the way, we went into 21, speaking to that point about confidence, we went into 21 with a 50% increase over 20, like probably a lot of companies, and we blew that away. So we were trying to figure out how do we work within the managerial structure to present the right information. And so what came out of that? Well, a couple of really important things. Our whole planning calendar was adjusted. We moved to a fiscal year, which was April 1st to the end of March. We moved up the budgeting process, the sales budget, the annual budget, 3 months, which was very painful. because the organization was not used to thinking about things that early, and they pushed back a lot about why they couldn't do it. And but my last few comments will be about what we're going through now. We have a data scientist, Ron Ajay, who's brilliant. He started us on the road, CDP, consumer data platform he established. We have a lot of more information and demographic information about who the consumer is, and we can pinpoint what channel they're buying in and who they are. It's a little scary, but it's very impressive. I had for the first time a chief marketing officer say to me, one day you're going to tell me what you need me to sell, and I will help you. Never before, because they're way out front in terms of shaping the brand, the direction, and most marketing people I've worked with could care less about what my excess inventory is, or even have, that's not even top of mind. Our journey started with this assessment to get closer to the consumer. My piece of it started last year in October with an outside consultancy that we looked at people, process, and technology. And they recommended merchandise financial planning role within our planning organization. They said, you should own the sales budgeting process, meaning planning. Okay, it was never us before. And they said, no, you have to create the guardrails. You have the information to create the sales plan, but also you're not thinking about gross margin. You're not thinking about inventory optimization, inventory turnover. You care about that, but the organization is not measuring KPIs, managing the metrics, a full set of metrics every time we go through a scenario of a sales plan. So we have a technology platform that we're signing a contract. The contract may be being signed today. I think the statement of work, there's three pieces of it. There's merchandise financial planning, there's demand planning, and supply planning, including allocation. I want to be able to take my piece of the supply chain. I know what I can affect coming to me, but I want to be able to do a fantastic job in getting close to the consumer in my piece of it. You know, our group manages demand, MFP demand and supply. So there's a lot of opportunity. We're not a huge company. There's a lot of flexibility I have in managing that whole process. That's very exciting.
And I think, John, that's a great segue. I mean, can you allow me to just
Please.
Interestingly, when we look at pharma, my customer is my patient, right? And customer, and my healthcare provider or practitioner that I interact with. Interestingly, pharmaceutical companies don't interact with patients directly, right? They have to go through SCPs or healthcare practitioner providers.
Yeah.
And if I am really trying to reimagine my commercial model, the driving business factors for me is to improve the health outcomes for my patients, to really bring the products to market very quickly, and really fuel the innovation. These are the key broader themes that industry is going. I mean, you go to any pharmaceutical website, you will see patient-centric, right? How do I achieve patient centricity if I don't even know much about my patient, right? My patient has prescription data. It has OTC data when it go to the over-the-counter product. It has insurance claims. It has social data. The patient also have medical history, electronic medical record. None of it is integrated, right? I mean, if I go to my healthcare provider today, the best thing would be perhaps a few printed record of my x-rays or my last blood test report that they have in their folder, right? They would have no idea if I had any MRI done anywhere because none of that data is fully connected. Interoperability that he talked about is a huge thing, but my devices are not that connected that well within pharma industry. So I have my own challenge, right? Unlike consumers where you can connect, like Amazon can connect, or the Netflix can connect with people thinking of different ways with digital. We at the pharma industry cannot do that. Not only that, but we have problems where if we have payers, insurance companies, providers, patients, us, pharmaceutical companies, academia, government, none of that is done. So how do I create a digital transformation strategy when things are really, really not, and by design, by the way, because there are, privacy challenges, HIPAA challenges, legal challenges, all of the things, which we have to think through, right? So it's not like one company will reimagine and then make a major leap. The other thing is, so to me, one initiative that we're working is Patient 360 program. How do I really create a 360 view? Because to me, at the end of the day, I need to make sure that I am helping my patient in every aspect of this disease life cycle, right? For prevention all the way to post-recovery. And every step, if that patient has some very personalized situation, then I deal with personalized medication as well. Is it a financial aspect of it? Is it, some reaction that you have because of that medicine, right? Some genome data that I need to dig in and do by the data scientists looking at it. If you look at it, industry overall loses some $700 billion on patient non-adherence because a lot of people just simply either take a wrong dose, skip the dose, or just completely drop the dose altogether within first year. Right. So the point I'm making, it's important that we at the pharmaceutical companies have a whole different approach towards understanding our own consumers, which is, pretty complicated.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I think like that's a fair point, which is very interesting that you mentioned that. And it's going to get into a digital ecosystem, right? And then there will be disruptors. Definitely pharma is very complicated. I came from there. And coming to Honeywell Aerospace, it's again like a similar challenge, right? Is the OEM like Boeing and Airbus, is that my customer? Or are the airlines who are leasing the aeroplanes from the OEMs, are they the customers? Or the actual person who is flying, who uses my Wi-Fi system when they are in flight, are they my customers? And how do you actually connect it? And you brought up a very good point. And as definitely pharma is the most complicated out of all, right? With so many key stakeholders. So how do we actually transform it into the digital ecosystem? And it kind of like goes back to where I started is you really need to understand that whole customer ecosystem and then see where you're going to actually break through that and reimagine how that process works, right? Even if it go back to my first job at Ford Motor Company in terms of how do I know what is happening when my driver is driving, right? And then suddenly there are some failures I cannot get. And Tesla basically now broke all of those intermediaries, right? By directly connecting their car and then getting the data from the automobile. Now you as the manufacturer has all the information. I know it's a little bit longer journey for a healthcare side, but someday it will come, right? Because at the end of the day, all the ecosystem partners have a vested interest in making value. And how do you enable it? So it might, digital supply chain might not be a keyword anymore, and it might become a digital ecosystem, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Very good. So by the way, I think, Leon, if it's okay, we can go a little to the end of the hour. We started a little bit late. Is that okay?
No problem. No, any problem. So, as long as talking, fine. Now it's late.
So what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually also invite the audience to ask a few questions. And so please type in chat. And what we'll do is a little different format. We'll do jump ball, right? So two panelists get to answer each question, right? And rather than I'll have all five of us. So we're going to go into a little bit speedier piece. So feel free to type your questions into chat. I'll give you one right now. So this is from Sandy Raman, talking about digital transformation opportunities. There's so many of them. What's your experience in prioritizing and sequencing them? Okay, so we'll start with Mahesh and then I'll pick another panelist.
It's a great question because it's context dependent. I was at a keynote last year, giving a keynote speech on digital transformation. And I remember what I was saying there. I said, for a company that still gets fax orders, moving to EDI is digital transformation. So it all, and the way we look at now, particularly as I'm also working with multiple organizations, is to look at what can you operationalize effectively and put that in one bucket. What can you innovate incrementally? Put that into the second bucket. So we look at transformation in that approach. What can you operationalize effectively? What can you innovate incrementally? And the third bucket is what can you transform rapidly? So good examples of that transform would be, hey, I'm launching a whole new go-to-market channel as an example. That could be a massive effort, but it's a transformation effort. Not sure if you're ready or not, right? Innovate incrementally could be, I leverage a digital twin to create a virtual presence of what I mean when I consolidate distribution centers, or when I want to put a new plant line on the factory floor, right? But I create a digital universe of that, simulate it, validate it before actually do it physically. So you use the concept of digital twins to do it. So that is what I would say, innovate incrementally.
Okay.
Operationalize effectively could be I automate leveraging my data insights today. I use some RPAs, I use some AI ML capabilities, and I
Putting it into practice.
put it into practice. I automate it. I probably do my closing of my financial books faster, or I put my slow moving products onto an automated forecasting capability versus human touch. Those are all.
Okay,
So that's kind of how you can.
love it. So I'm gonna ask Arun to answer that question as well. How do you prioritize projects and think about all the different things that a company could do?
Yeah, I think it goes back to where I started, right? It's really the customer value, right? And what is that value, number one? The second thing is you need to show short-term wins as well. You cannot say, okay, here is my 3-year roadmap, and then come after 3 years and I'm going to deliver some value, right? So how do you actually make sure that you understand incremental value is as important as the long-term value? So that is the second addition criteria. The third is, can you really force that discussion around you have infinite demand, but you have only finite capacity, right? So how do you make sure that whatever you are driving is actually aligned with the outcomes of the organization, and then use that to force the prioritization, right? We in Honeywell, we call like a say-do ratio. That is like how much of saying that you are actually doing. I'm also saying that we also need to think about no-don't ratio, right? How much you are going to actually stop, right? So it's those three aspects of it, right? First of all, make sure that you are defining the value from the customer side of it. And then the second thing is ensuring that whatever that you're doing, there is short-term value that you can recognize, at the same time moving the long-term needle. The third thing is really forcing that prioritization to say your capacity is constrained. So how are you going to say no? Because what happens is anytime you go to a company, there are like hundreds and thousands of projects lists, right? Like they're all there. How do you just say that, hey, I'm going to just draw the line and then I'm not going to do anything below this, and force that top 3 kind of a discussion? What are the top 3 projects that you're going to focus on? That's it, nothing else, right? So that requires a lot of leadership and courage to say no, right? Because most of these projects might have some value. So that leadership courage of saying no and focusing is the most critical aspect of prioritizing and sequencing.
Love it, love it. That's huge, right? Because you have to have the value, you have to have the vision. I mean, you're talking about really having that comprehensive strategy. Okay, question. We'll put it to Mike and to Glenn this time. What does supply chain analytics mean to your company? And if you want to get specific, let's talk about your function and your role. So, Mike, why don't you take a shot at that one?
Okay, from a jump ball perspective, I'll go quick, John. So, analytics could be open-ended, but, for me, I'll take it from a S&OP lens is, are we delivering our plans and are we delivering results? So it comes back to driving decision-making and getting faster decision-making and making sure that there is alignment. So it comes down to rigor, alignment, metrics, and when you have that in your analytics, it's everyone's talking a common language and you're driving to results. So it starts with the strategic plan. And are you delivering those results? And do you have the information to change course? Because the only thing we all know about a forecast is they're inherently wrong. And it's our ability to change and pivot. And in the world of S&OP, it's around decision making and scenario planning. So we're going to plan for X, but if Y or Z happen, are we able to pivot and see that? I think on the other spectrum is making sure we're not boiling the ocean and that overwhelming people. So it's being able to take something very complex and boil it down into a simple format that we can explain to in a non-technical way, and that it's understood by all. So that's really analytics to me, is making data accessible for the entire business to drive decisions.
Mhm. Excellent, love it. And the ability to react as well is huge, right?
Yeah.
Glenn, please.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the demand side of the supply analytics or supply chain my whole life. I've not really been on the supply side, so I never had a company management sales say to me, "Thank you for helping me achieve my sales plan." They've always said to me, "Well, we could have done $2 million more, $20 million more." I've never, at the end of the year, I remember distinctly being at a sales meeting celebrating the year and sitting at the table with our chief sales person telling me, "How come we can't ship another $1 million to Amazon this week?" At the end of the year. And we had gone probably, at that year, we were probably 23% over our budget. I think a lot is asked of us as you know, sometimes that we are where the rubber hits the road, right? That's a hackneyed expression, but other areas of the organization can get it wrong every day. Marketing, sales, and I'm not being I'm not trying to pump up the importance of planning, but planning really can't get it wrong. And even when you're right, you're not right enough. And I think what's changing, I think, is a more objective approach to the data, right? It's not necessarily more data. That's where AI and ML come in, because you know, that these algorithms have the capability to process a lot of data. It's really the right data. You know, when they were, I remember they were studying the AIDS epidemic. They were studying people that didn't get AIDS, that were highly exposed, right? It's really the right information. It's not necessarily more. So when I think about supply chain analytics, I always think, do I have the right piece of information and not necessarily more, right? And that's always been a guiding principle for me. Being in predictive analytics or demand planning is a very odd, as I mentioned, my family's in politics. You have to be very thick-skinned, I think, in both areas, in the sense that what you do is not really well understood by the organization. And we're entering a time where we need to step up, right? We need to take a leadership role in our organizations. And for that, it's a very different skill set, right?
Yeah.
Than trying to explain stochastic forecasting. It's pointless, right? Even forecast accuracy, which is more understandable to the general population, may not matter in your organization today, right? It may not be the most important conversation you need to have with the leadership. So that's what I would leave it. My biggest learning has been, how do I properly step up and explain how I can change, shape the future without, you know, eyes rolling and, you know, in the organization.
Excellent, excellent. All right, last question, guys. And I'm going to put jump ball to Kashif and Mahesh. So, question is, yeah, this is it, right? Mahesh is very tall. We'll see. So the question is, you know, what action we're taking to prepare our people for this journey, right? How do we prepare them with analytical skills, and how do we achieve success in that area? So Kashif.
Yeah, I mean, digital dexterity is a huge thing, right? I mean, the four big sort of domains that we talked about, the digital strategy, business strategy, operations management, and then the organizational skill. So you're referring to that bucket, and I feel that I think Ash also pointed that one out, that people who have been working in a company for a long time, 15, 20 years, when these conversations around digital transformation are presented, the first, fear is, oh my God, I mean, are they taking my job? I mean, right? I mean, so I think the leaders have a huge responsibility in bringing this transition of a skill set internally with a well-planned thought process. You cannot just simply, put it on the people and expect them that they will just go and grow their, digital acumen. So I always feel that whether we're in business side technology or otherwise, having the right transparency to the goals and objectives, it will start from there on. And then basically, creating a culture internally that can really promote that kind of learning internally.
Yeah.
If we take it a very mechanical approach, to take these 5 courses
Yeah.
and then you
Yeah.
will be, digital capable, would probably not work in my opinion. What I've seen where we motivate rightly, we enunciate the goals and why we're doing things, and then really engage them in such a way that they also improve their own skill set. They get excited about this journey.
Yeah.
And because the people have a lot of rich knowledge in their head, and because of the processes and experiences and all that, all we have to do is really sort of bring innovation through coaching and through innovation, seminars and labs internally to really promote that kind of skill and really help shift the culture.
It's really, I mean, it's an effort in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, one day I asked the CEO of Pfizer a simple question in a town hall. I asked him, I said, every top pharmaceutical company has top talented people, huge budget in R&D, best of the class commercial teams. So what does really differentiate you from other pharmaceutical company? And he just responded with one word. He said culture. And he really then focused heavily on building the culture when I was at Pfizer. So idea is really, and this learning is part of that part of it.
Excellent. And the last word, Mahesh?
Sure. It's an ongoing question, right, which has not been solved for a long time about people and development and skills. But I think if we just reflect back on how we are learning and engaging with devices like these, like iPhones, and how kids actually do it, there's no training manual, nothing, but you just start using it. So what makes it happen? And it's really kind of, it's really those neural patterns, if you could call it, right, that get developed in our brains that makes you ready for that, or that acumen that Kashif was talking about. So it ends up being a two-step process in my view, and based on what we are noticing. One is clearly there is a level of skilling and tooling you need to do initially. And that probably is done better if you declare majors and minors, digital majors, digital minors, what should that be? But that is a level of tooling and skilling. But after that, it's really how do you make that part of the DNA of the organization? Because every time you introduce a new capability, now if you have to spend time training and if you have to spend time creating these courses and all of that, you lose the agility. So bottom line, it becomes, where do you get to the DNA where the next time you introduce something, of course you introduce it
Like
in
adoption,
Exactly. It's done in a way that it is self-explanatory, but you don't have to spend too much time training and skilling.
It naturally gets.
It naturally gets up. And I think that's what the Pfizer CEO was talking about, culture, right? Because how do you get into the DNA and the culture? So yeah, take that first step and then get there. Not easy, but that's where we have to go.
So guys, we're out of time, unfortunately. We could talk a lot more. But I wanted to thank all of you. Great discussion, great panelists interaction, great questions from the audience. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having us. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care, folks.
Thank you very much.
Great.